first are the minutes of the March 2nd meeting.
Have more approval.
Second. Can I see just for a second? I have something actually.
A typo? Two?
Well, I think it.
Oh, on the very last page, BJ, Mr. Colleen noted there is consensus that the pedal people will be allowed to continue their work within the city.
Ah.
And the consensus is, we hope there will be some solution that would allow them to continue. I mean, everyone agrees we value their services. It's a great bunch of people. But we are not stating that it will.
Okay.
I understood it was the study committee at the time that you were talking about, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, Mimi was trying to summarize what we're doing, I got all confused.
Sorry.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
is the meeting being recorded?
Oh, would you introduce yourself, videographer?
Mimi Odgers. I am videotaping for North Street Neighborhood Association.
Thank you. And Anne Marie is here. I'll bet you hear about the budgets. Would you like to, how do you want to proceed?
Do you want me to just go through, Ned, the summary pages?
Sure, why don't we just do this? What I was planning to do is just a brief presentation tonight. We have the materials here to start digesting the budget and what we're trying to do. Also, we're willing to meet you in small work groups in the morning or late afternoons if you like, as we have for the past few years. So you have a better understanding of the budget also without having a quorum present. So we can do that also this year. Basically, overall, we have some projects attached to the enterprise funds that we need to look at and fund those projects. The general side, we've been asked to take a 1.2% budget cut, about a little less than $50,000. So we've eliminated some winter seasonal positions and an engineering technician position that hasn't been filled. So we're meeting that. The landfill's closing in a year, so that budget is basically zeroing itself out per se. And we'll see what the end of that brings us. But with that, we can just go over briefly each one. We can take the solid waste enterprise budget first and have Anne Marie just run through it briefly what we're doing here.
Let's see.
So the way the packages are set up is you have the summary spreadsheets that basically present each of the different funds. So the packages that you have start with the general fund, and they have a summary page on the top, and then each of the separate divisions would have a summary beneath that. Those summaries represent the next set of paperwork is the actual line items from the budget. So it's each individual expense line item. If you want to get into that level of detail at another time, then we can go into each of these separate divisions. The sewer enterprise follows the same format. You have the spreadsheet summary. You have your line item detail as your second group. But because the sewer enterprise has a rate schedule, we have two sort of sample rate structures after that. And then we would get to the landfill enterprise summary.
Let me back up on this one just a brief second. The reason why you have two different summaries is that we were trying two different budgets out. We're doing the comprehensive wastewater management plan this year and the upcoming next year. And what we were trying to do is, with the assumptions, is try to start saving some money in advance for these large projects that we believe are going to happen. So the first one has got a $500,000 budget or line item set aside each year for saving money for these capital projects that we'll be undertaking in future years. The second one is zero. Since we don't have the plan done, we can do a project by project basis how we fund these projects. We did this with the water treatment plant. When we were going to go into construction, we started saving, I think, about 2 or 3 years in advance of that construction project. So we're trying that similarly, and you can see what happens with the rate structure by trying to save this money in advance. We ran a scenario late last week, I think it was, and looked at putting aside $2 million a year for these capital projects going forward. And basically the rates looked like they were almost doubling, going up to 40%. So we backed off to a $0.5 million one, just so the board catches the flavor of where the direction of the enterprise funds are going with these capital projects we're looking at doing.
So this is comparing the 7.44% change with the 10.12% change in the rate?
Yes. By setting aside $500,000 a year for future projects.
There are two of these.
You wanna start with sewer?
That's what, yeah, we're on right now. is-
Sewer.
I just wanted that brief,
You've
why
got
why
one
we
and
had
then there's
two
a second one.
different schedules in here, and what their reason behind them, the two different assumptions. And you'll see, we've done the same exact thing in water, the same thing.
So do you wanna start with the sewer equation, is that?
We can, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So the sewer enterprise, there's the summary page from the spreadsheet. And that gives you basically a summary of each of the changes in each of the line items. The first line item is personal services. You have various increases and then reductions. The difference from the prior year that's being proposed, all of these budgets are right now preliminary. We don't have final numbers at all. The general fund hasn't closed yet. We need the general fund to close before we get the indirects that complete the enterprise fund process. So this is just a preliminary discussion. But we are showing a decrease of $7,870 in personal services overall for the sewer enterprise fund. We have a net increase in ordinary maintenance expenditures of $52,000. And you can see there are various increases and decreases, just trying to true up the actual experience out at the plant to come up with a realistic number. So we had a $30,000 electricity expense that should be increased, $15,000 oil expense decrease, $2,000 lab sample analysis increase, $45,000 in sludge disposal expense increase, $5,000 in polymer expense decrease, and $5,000 in sodium hydroxide expense and a decrease. So the capital line item is the main change. It's $438,440 increase.
What did the $15,000 oil expense decrease?
That's because they did some revamping of electrical, or actually it was
Right, through the
propane.
ESCO program the city undertook, we went to natural gas,
Okay.
so it decreased our dependency on oil down there. And I just made a note, I wanted to make sure that we had an increase in natural gas in this budget, which I don't see that. Excuse me.
We should start that then and look and see
Yeah,
what's
just
going
like,
on there.
Okay, so then the capital expenses?
So the sewer line replacement line item increased by $100,000. Is that the North Street project that is planned for next year? There's also an amount in, I think that line item is $400,000 in total, plus there's going to be some encumbered amounts
Yes.
from the current year. And then we have a pump and motors expense decrease of $10,000, government surplus decrease of $3,000, decrease in principal payments on existing long-term debt of $3,000. We have a $210,000 increase in principal payments on the long-term debt due to the proposed comprehensive plan, the bar rack installation project, the DPW facility, and the Bradford Street pump station. So all of those have been worked into bond schedules, and that's the impact on our
That's the
principal
bond
payments.
payment.
That's right. There's $10,685 decrease in interest payments on existing long-term debt, but then there's an increase due again to those same proposed projects. And then we have a $30,000 capital reserve account transfer budgeted. So again, when you're reviewing your packages, you can go and look at each of the individual divisions that comprise the sewer enterprise fund. and you can trace those changes to each of the affected divisions. And then you can also tie that into the individual line items. You have all that information that you can kind of get an overall review of.
Okay.
Then as a result of that sort of preliminary presentation of the 2012 budget, as Ned said, we ran 2 different scenarios for the rate schedules.
So Anne Marie, if you were gonna characterize the lower rate schedule, is that one that essentially breaks even for the year, or?
I think what Ned's attempting to do here is he's trying to say that we are anticipating, due to the comprehensive wastewater plan, some large capital projects in the future.
Of course.
And he feels as though one way to address that requirement is to set aside an amount that will accumulate over time. The difficulty with our situation right now is that we don't have the results of that study, so we don't know what the timing is on those large projects, and so we can't sort of foresee a bond issuance in a certain year to meet the requirements as a result of the study. So this is sort of...
I understand that, but, so we have one with a 10% approximately increase, the other at 7.
That's just, the 0 is just kind of saying, okay, if you decide to do nothing, then this
7.
is, yes. So if you
That's,
decide...
that's what I mean, that's, so that maintains status quo.
Right.
10% we begin setting money aside.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, oh, go ahead. Well, I was just trying to figure out which is which. Which is the 10%.
2000.
This is setting aside more money.
Yes, this is status quo.
Okay, I see.
Essentially,
That-
meet
thank
their
you.
obligations,
Yeah, right.
maintain the reserve
Right.
about where it is.
Right,
Right, the plan won't get finished till the end of 2012.
right.
And therefore, with that, we'll have long-range capital plans we should be looking at. My concern is that the NIPD's permit's coming out in 2013. I have no doubt there's gonna be a nitrogen reduction requirement of that. Is that $5 million at the plant, or is it $1 million, or is it $10 million? That's what I don't.
Totally get it. I'm trying to organize in my head what the 7.4%.
That's status
Signifies.
quo, and then setting aside money.
Mike?
In the budget that where we're setting aside money for future projects, I don't see a difference in the FY12 budgets for the amount of money that's reserved for capital projects. So I don't, what leads to the difference in FY12 between 7.4% and 10.1%?
The amount of the fund balance.
Which line is that?
It's the projected fund balance.
Second to the last.
Mike might be asking, does that must show up somewhere up above
I would
also?
have thought it showed up above.
Well, what I'm doing with these schedules is just trying out various rates. So in this case, it's just the rate that I changed, which resulted in a larger fund balance amount.
I see.
Okay, so the one that gives you the
So
fund
basically,
balance of 853 is the 10%
right,
budget.
Oh, it shows up in the RE profit loss and the top of the bottom group?
right, exactly. So there's a greater loss projected if you only go up 7% versus 10%. So you reduce the amount of your loss. But these, again, they're preliminary schedules, and they're just sort of showing you the impact of various scenarios. You can decide what kind of a rate you're comfortable with, and then we can run these schedules with your suggestion, your proposal for what you want to see.
Any other questions about the sewer at this point?
Well, yeah, I do have questions, but it all relates to this wastewater management study, and we'll get into that when we get into the,
And we'll get back to
Agenda.
this at least 2
Yeah.
more times.
yeah,
One thing I would like to sort of bring up, because it's something that I've been working on recently, we've been paying a lot of attention to the DOR certified free cash amounts. And I've been working with the auditor's office to try to get a handle on what's a good way to predict that number going forward. So far, we really can't get a grasp of that. So I've actually this year I've added a separate line item for the certified free cash from DOR, and then what the projected fund balance will be on the basis of our projections of activity. One of the things that the auditor's office and the external auditor don't do is they don't try to predict what the DOR certified amount will be, because they often have a lot of different activity. They work on an accrual basis. The city works on a cash basis. They include sources of funds like bond issuance. So I'm trying to get a reconciliation between what DOR certifies and what we have as the designated fund balance, and then try to come up with a safe projection for your purposes so that you can see where the fund balances are headed. That process is ongoing, so I'm not there yet, and that will also impact future schedules. Once I get a clearer sense of what's a safe amount of activity to include in the projections for the fund balance, then we can go with that more, certain number in future projections.
Are you gonna stay here for the discussion of the stabilization fund?
I wasn't going to.
No.
The other thing that's happening with that is I talked to the city auditor, and she's going to pass that by DOR. If we set aside, as you can see with the $500,000 into the capital reserve account, if we start to build up our capital reserve account, can that serve as an emergency fund that we can do transfers during the course of a year instead of going to the process of setting up a stabilization fund? If our capital reserve account is sufficient to meet emergency demands, then as they arise, can we just make that transfer throughout the course of the year without waiting for DOR certification of free cash? That's an open question to DOR, so I'm also waiting for that response. That might be another way to address that same issue.
I don't think they'll allow it, but it's worth asking.
They are asking, yeah. So then there's the enterprise fund, the landfill. Did you want to skip over that?
Sure, we can take that one next.
So again, you have the same sort of setup for your summary page on the landfill. The net changes in each of the categories of expenditures. One of the odd sort of circumstances in fiscal year 2012 is that there's 261 working days in that fiscal year. DOR has requested or required that the city now account for the actual number of working days. We used to just work with 26 periods, and now they've gone to a different methodology. So in 2011, we've got 9 days to make up for budgeting purposes, and in 2012, we've got only 1 day. So that's another sort of odd change that we needed to account for in the 2012 budget. So there's very small changes up and down to come up with the difference of $3,569 from the fiscal year 2011 budget. And then in the ordinary maintenance portion of the landfill enterprise, we're projecting for 2012 a decrease of $30,300. That decrease is driven largely by architectural and engineering expense decrease of $50,000, a $15,000 legal expense decrease, and then offset by a $20,000 landfill operations expense increase. The other changes are relatively minor. For the capital line item, there's a $1,678,000 increase. And that increase is driven mainly by the final expenditure needed to fund the closure-related expenditures. So that's sort of the final truing up. We did a financial assurance mechanism. We tried to account for all of the anticipated closure expenditures, any lingering revenue that might be coming in from the cell tower and Amoresco, and then our existing closure balances, and basically that's the amount of expense needed to tie up the final year so that we
It's basically the last contribution.
to meet all of our obligations. So again, you have the expense detail that you can go over, take a look at each individual line item. And then we have a sort of preliminary presentation of what the expense total, and then we have projected revenues for 2012. Again, the free cash transfer is just the amount required to result in a zero profit loss in that final year. We're projecting that the undesignated fund balance will have 665 at the time of closure. This schedule also has a assumption page. And that gives you all the details on basically the final activity.
Okay.
I think one of the changes in the OOM or capital cost is a $500,000 line item. And that's related to $150,000 for generator expenses and $350 for leachate plant expenses in the final fiscal year 2012. I don't know if you guys want to speak to any of that.
Those last two expenditures, we're looking at decommissioning the existing leachate plant as part of the closure of the landfill. And with it, the gen set that's in there is, it's a huge gen set to power the whole plant. So we're looking at smaller outside gen sets for the pump station and the flare going forward. So that there's just small standalone gen sets for emergency power while we decommission the entire leachate plant.
Jensen?
Emergency back power, or generators for power backup in case of failure.
The one in that leachate plant is dead?
Oversized.
Oh, so you couldn't,
It's huge,
Couldn't
and
use it.
what's happening, my understanding is that it only gets used, obviously, in case of emergency, but it starts up for 20 hours, or 20 minutes, one day a week, and basically it's just hurting the engine by not being run on a regular basis.
It's also over 20 years old and nearing the end of its design life, so we need this new generator to get us at least another 15 or 20 years at the site.
Oh.
In about a
it's
quarter
our last
of
chance
the
to buy one, all right.
Now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
And also, if you're looking at the landfill revenue, you can see that the projections are somewhat conservative. It looks as though refuse fees are going down, stickers are going down. Each of the categories is, with the exception of the sale of scrap metal,
All right.
looks to decrease.
Is there a projection that the landfill would stay open longer than what we have said because of the operation on South Street?
At this point, no, we're still doing, Dave's just started working on capacity analysis again, so right now, no, but that could change in a month.
We're gonna talk about this in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
the tonnage into the landfill has dropped off some, both because of the economy and because of other marketplace factors.
Yeah.
So the landfill life will be extended, obviously, if we're not putting as much trash in. So.
Water enterprise?
So the water enterprise, again, the same format. The personal services is projected to increase by $21,913. This one is a bit larger than the other funds that we look at, driven mainly by 10,400 seasonal employee expense increase for watershed maintenance. Other than that, it's the same sort of changes up and down. There's a decrease in ordinary maintenance of $228,000. And that decrease is driven mainly by an engineering expense decrease of $150,000, and then $90,000 granular activated carbon expense. What's actually happening there is that line item was originally categorized under OM, and it's going to be shifted over into the capital line item, because it ends up that it's something that we're not changing out every year. They're going to change it out on a, what's the schedule?
We're trying to get into a 2-year cycle going forward, is my understanding. The the carbons lasted much longer than we thought it would. And it was always an O&M, so it always got returned. And so we put it in the capital side so we can encumber it each year. And that way when it comes to swap out the carbon, we have the funds available.
So we're actually going to fund that fully through the capital line item, which sort of drives a large capital increase of $651,000. 360 of that is the granular activated carbon expense, but that total is going to be offset by the amount that's been accumulated in the fund balance from the operations and maintenance, and I think that amount was, yeah, 269,953 is accumulated, and we're going to roll that over, release that from ordinary maintenance and put it into the capital line item, so it's really not such a large amount. So we have for the capital line items, $150,000 for water study expense decrease. We're encumbering $248,000 for asset and forest studies. We've got $300,000 for an increase for reservoir construction. That's due to a Tata and Howard study for flow meters, etc. And the total line item is $400,000. We've got a $25,000 radio expense decrease. The total funded for 2012 will be $50,000. We've got $25,000 decrease in vehicle expense. Total funded for 2012 is $25,000. We have a $35,000 water line replacement increase. That line item is $350,000 total funded, with the North Street project being the project that's scheduled for next year. There's a $25,000 meter expense increase, with $50,000 being funded. $10,000 hydrant expense increase, $30,000 is the total funded. We have some new capital line items for the treatment plant. One is a $10,000 vehicle expense increase. We have a $60,000 replace control and measure equipment expense. We've got $10,000 for replacing equipment technology expense. There's the granular activated carbon that we talked about, and then there's a computer equipment expense increase related to the SCADA system. And then there's a debt increase related to the existing debt that we have out there, and then there's a corresponding interest expense decrease. And again, you have your individual line items that you can discuss at length, and then two separate rate schedules with the same sort of scenario as the sewer enterprise fund. We're funding $500,000 for capital projects, and then we're taking that out and showing you how that impacts the rates against the actual scenario. Might be somewhere in between. This is just sort of a preliminary point to have the discussion get started.
And where would, okay.
Kind of a suction page or two.
Yep, so pages should be attached to both instances.
Yeah.
So for the water enterprise fund, there are a few projects that are going to impact the debt service schedules. There's a $1.2 million Upper Roberts Meadow construction project. There's a $6 million reservoir project that's going to occur in two phases. $3 million is a bond issuance in fiscal year 2015, and $3 million is a bond issuance in 2016. So that affects the rate schedule further down the line, but those future projects are worked in. We're anticipating 119,000 additional rebuild wells and $4.2 million for the new facility. Those debt service payments begin in 2013. There's the...
Is that the DPW facility?
It is.
There's 350,000 water improvements, and then the granular activated carbon with the offset of the current year encumbrance. And then there's just some activity that decreased our 2011 fund balance. We had the $500,000 land purchase offset by the DEP grant, but then we need to reimburse a water study expense that was utilized for the total amount of $700,000 for that land purchase. One of the increases to revenue this year was Coke's anticipated consumption increase, and that's a conservative estimate of annual at 71,175 billable units. And then that last line item is the asset management plan resulting in 500,000 injection into the capital accounts, or we're just leaving it at 0. So the last, we already went over the general fund, right? That's
So just to reiterate, the 9.03% increase meets all of our obligations, gives us stable undesignated fund balances and reserve accounts. The 10.13% increase begins to build that up.
Right, exactly. And it's sort of going with what appears to be a 10% increase to satisfy the anticipated future capital requirements.
For 13, 14.
So as Ned said, the general fund is pretty straightforward. Basically, we held to no increase for regular operations and maintenance and capital line items, but we had a $64,690 decrease in personal services, due mainly to the elimination of the civil engineer technician position and 3 seasonal positions.
When I talked about the approximately $47,000 budget cut, the civil engineering position is funded 2/3 by enterprise fund, 1/3 by the general. So it's really a $17,000 cut on the general side, not a $50,000 cut. So I was making up with the seasonals and the $17,000, that would be basically our budget cut for the year. That's suggested by the
This is great stuff.
It's a lot to go through, and I'll straighten up. I've noticed quite a few little errors. I usually cut and paste a lot of this stuff.
We saw every one of them.
Good at that. So I'll make those changes and it's in the schedule. Thank you.
So as I stated earlier, staff is willing to meet with you at your conveniences and small groups to go through these, so you really have a full understanding of the details of budget and any questions can be asked and answered. And
Great. Thank you.
thank you, Anna.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, that leads us into the landfill tip fee discussion.
We've been observing changes in the solid waste marketplace that we want to bring to the board's attention. There's a number of things that are going on. I'll start with the really big picture overview. I was reviewing some statewide data on solid waste generation, and there's about a 9 to 10% drop in solid waste generation statewide. There's about a 25% reduction in construction demolition debris being generated statewide. Across the state, there's been about a 15% reduction in the amount of waste going into landfills.
Well, how much?
15%. And there's been about a 2% drop in the amount of waste being delivered to municipal waste combustors or waste energy facilities. So in general, across the marketplace, there's been, there's just less material being disposed of. Mainly, I'm sure, related to the current state of the economy. So how that's affecting us is that some facilities have begun to drop their gate rate tip fee. We understand that some of the other disposal facilities in the region have dropped their fees to as low as $60 a ton, or the low 60s. To refresh the board on where we are, at the landfill currently, our base tip fee is $72.50 a ton. So we're a little bit higher than the facility, than the sort of competing facilities at the moment. We have a tiered discount system that the board approved in days gone by here, where depending on the amount of billings per month, we drop the tip fee. For example, we drop the tip fee $5 a ton if the invoice is $25,000 or over between $25,000 and $50,000 a month. They get a reduction of $7.50 a ton for billings over $50,000 a month, is where we are now. So we've been reviewing sort of the status of the accounts that we have at the landfill with the major groups of accounts that use the facility. And what we've noticed since the beginning of the year is that a number of haulers have stopped using the landfill. And we think this is in part some smaller haulers, we believe may be using the New Valley Recycling Facility, because we've seen a number of the smaller ones just stop coming in altogether. We've also noticed Duso Trucking really has dropped off almost entirely from the use of the landfill. And Alternative Recycling Systems has also started to divert some of their tonnage to other disposal facilities. So it's a combination, I think, of competition from Valley Recycling and tip fees at other facilities that are lower, and also the option that Valley Recycling has of doing truck transfer long haul to disposal facilities in other states, at a competitive rate. So there's a number of things going on here, but the bottom line is that the tonnage is off at the landfill. That impacts the revenue that we have, so we do revenue projections in these budgets that Anne Marie has with us. So we've been having some discussions internally about the need to adjust the tip fee to adjust to some of the market forces that are out there right now. And we have discussed internally the idea of dropping the tip fee somewhere in the range of $60 to $62.50 a ton, and to do away with the tier discount. We feel that the tier discount really hasn't been a significant driver in terms of hauler behavior, in terms of the haulers saying, geez, I can really make I can get a discount this month if I bring have a certain dollar amount. Not really having that much of an impact. So we're proposing to drop the discount and to drop the tip fee. One thing that's interesting is that Duso Trucking, who was one of the biggest clients, if not the biggest account that we have at the landfill, they were achieving a $7.50 discount under the tier discount system, which means they were paying an effective tip fee of $65 a ton, and they've stopped using the landfill. So that indicates that if we would, I believe, it indicates if we would drop the tip fee to $65 a ton, it wouldn't have any impact on getting the trash from Duso Trucking back into the landfill. And that spurred the discussion of dropping it somewhere below 65 to 62.50 or as low as 60. The option, there's pros and cons to the options. You could take a stepped fashion and drop it to 62.50 and see if that has any impact on the marketplace, and let a few weeks go by, and if we don't see any change, we can have this discussion again in another future board meeting. Or you could drop it lower. The $60 a ton, I think, would be on par with the current gate rate at Covanta Waste Energy Facility in Agawam. So
The 60 would?
It would be.
Can you say that again?
The $60 tip fee is the current gate rate at the Waste Energy Facility in Agawam.
no, it's not, I mean, you know, we can only speculate, but, I mean, they're setting up a whole new business there with a whole new business model, which clearly can't be built around using the landfill. So it's not clear in my mind that, it may have nothing whatsoever to do with our tip fee. I'm not arguing
Talking
against
about the
changing
South
it.
Street operation?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that whole thing has
Yeah.
to be designed, that business has to be figured out in a way that doesn't require a landfill to be 8 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right, I mean, we don't know, there's no guarantee that if you drop the tip fee, then look, you know,
I
that
don't
trash
think-
will come back.
I'm sure they've signed a contract, I would
That's
imagine
right.
they've signed a
Yeah.
contract with someone.
Long term.
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't know that. I mean, the short-term gate rates are so low that may be just a short-term opportunity, and you may not be able to get a longer-term contract, you know, with that value. But you're right, I mean, there's uncertainty in that. All you can go into it thinking is that there's a marketplace out there, we fit into it somehow, you know, how do you want to
How do you
approach
want
it?
it to be?
And the only way, and there's really no way of finding out other than making a change, and is seeing what the changes in the system are.
To what extent can we cut expenses along with the decreased volume?
The expenses aren't, they're not
Pretty much-
altered.
Pretty much fixed.
They-
Because our contract with,
Solid waste solutions.
Solid Waste Solutions is fixed.
It
It's
is.
fixed with a CPI increase every year. So it's typically 2 to 3% increase.
Yeah. Not
You know, our whole budget premise was looking at, we were closing in June of 2012.
Yeah.
And now, if we have additional capacity, we still have these fixed operational costs that extend past that with lesser revenues coming in. So in the budget, we looked at, instead of 50,000 tons a year at $70 a ton, they put it down to 40,000 tons. Can we get back up to 50,000 tons a year and on schedule to close it in mid-2012 without incurring fixed costs after that point? And with it, you would generate more revenue than the 2.8 million. If say it was $60 a ton, you run all 50,000 tons a year, that's $3 million in generation, not 2.8. So you are bringing a little more money, you're filling it at its scheduled rate and trying to be out of business in what we estimated originally as being June of 2012. Rather than this thing lingering out maybe into December of 2012 with, you know, $400,000 or $300,000 in operational expenses attached to it,
And losses.
potentially.
oh, I'm sorry. Jim?
With Duso starting a new operation on South Street, do you really think that you can drop it low enough to bring him back into the fold, at least partially? So that you get your tonnage up?
We won't know until we try.
I mean, that's the whole concept, Jim. I think, you know, the idea is we don't know what Duso's price, you know, what Valley Recycling's price point is. We don't know. We know if they're hauling locally, they're paying at least $60 a ton in Covanta. If he's doing transfer trailer hauls to Seneca Falls or some other New York State facility, you know, you'd have to estimate what their haul costs are and figure out what the break-even point is. You know, if you just don't know, I think, until you make the change and then you see if it alters behavior within the marketplace, then you know what the effect is.
Can we talk to him about
Well, we had talked about that, but I think if I was a business owner and somebody called me and said, geez, I wanna drop the tip fee to $60, what do you think? I'd say, well, geez, I don't think that's quite low enough. If it was 50, I think that would be great, or whatever, so I think it would be hard to get a true read from any of the haulers, quite frankly, without making the change and then seeing if it impacts behavior.
well, what is there to be lost for having a conversation? I mean, it's not a commitment, it's a discussion.
Well, there was a conversation months ago with Mr. Duso also that he committed himself to this facility until it was filled.
Can you make the closing budget work out at around 60?
Yeah, you know, if you do 60, you know, and then just said if you change it to $60 a ton and we get back up to the 50,000 tons a year, your revenue's $3 million. So the revenue would be above what Anne Marie's currently carrying in the projections, and that's a good thing, right? Your revenue will be up, and then your operational cost in the long term will be, will be less because the landfill life will be less. That's how the private sector looks at landfill facilities. Is that the way to maximize your profitability from a facility is to fill the space that you have in the least amount of time, because it reduces your operating cost and you get the revenue over a short amount of time. So the basic premise of that particular market.
Are you, what are you looking to ask us something specific?
The board's opinion on changing the tip fee. I think the
We
last
need a
time,
motion.
I would make a motion that we allow the staff to lower the tip fee to or around the figures that were discussed by staff. And they had 2 figures that they discussed. And it would be up to them to adjust as they can.
And whether or not they would have tiers.
Yeah,
What we propose to do is start at $62.50 with no tier discounts. We wait 2 weeks to a month to see what happens operationally. Do we get more stream coming back or not? And then we can come back and have another discussion with the board if you wanted to about lowering it to 60 or something in between the two.
Sounds like Jim's motion gives you that discretion. Gary?
I'll second that motion. Number one. Number two, my question was, how does the word get out?
Notify the haulers.
Okay, so you do tell them when the fees drop. Okay. All right.
I would say just in passing, a few years back, we had a problem with some haulers not paying their bill promptly. And the tier thing was put in with a proviso that they have to make the payment within terms.
That's right.
So it'd probably be good if there's some incentive to pay promptly.
we don't think that the way the tier system is set up, it's not really working in that fashion, because the tier system only impacts the largest haulers.
Right, but it could be a $2 per ton discount if you pay within 30 days, or I'm just suggesting there be a...
I think the issue with Allied, Waste Management, some of these other haulers, they have an invoice payment system there, and whether they get, and once that invoice gets thrown into this thing, whether they pay in advance and get a discount.
Doesn't matter. It's just that one hauler, I think, that was running late.
Yeah, and it doesn't impact the small guys where we have payment problems. It's, the big ones are the ones that would benefit from it, and they don't seem to care a whole lot about it, so.
Any further discussion about this? All in favor? The motion is to give the staff discretion to drop into that 60 to 62.50 per ton range as they see fit. All in favor of that?
Aye.
No opposed. Okay. Okay, next, the snafu around whether the free cash was designated and approved by the Department of Revenue, tangled up that purchase of the land out in Whately. And there's a discussion of establishing stabilization funds for the water, sewer, and solid waste enterprise funds.
I was hoping to have a package from Chris Powell ready for you tonight, and it did not come. Basically, from July 1st until DOR determines our free cash account, our undesignated fund balance, we can't touch those funds. So we're sitting on large pools of money that we have no access to for 6-7 months out of the year. So a discussion started with the finance office of whether or not we should look at either some capital accounts or stabilization funds, so that these monies are readily available to the board for emergency purchases or acquisitions, whatever you want it for. So this was the initial discussion, and like I said, I was hoping to have a draft order to go to City Council that you could review and have a more full discussion on, but it hasn't come yet. So it's not a 10-minute conversation, it's a 1-minute conversation, just so you know about it.
Contract for trees to Weston Nurseries in the amount of $9,700.
Move approval.
Second.
The Northampton Tree Committee applied through this grant through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. The DPW is acting as the fiscal agent. The $9,800 grant award to the Northampton Tree Committee is for a tree giveaway on April 30th, 2011 at Smith Vocational and Agricultural High School next door. It's kind of a revolving fund. The city has to spend the money first and gets reimbursed, and there's a 15% local match for staff and volunteering time. The trees are 4 to 8 feet tall on a variety of species to give away to residents who are willing to attend a planting workshop and plant the trees within city limits. Trees on a first come, first basis. So this is, like I said, this is a grant that came through the National Grid Partnership Grant, where it's part of their tree mitigation. When they come to and cut down a number of trees because of wires and so on, they set up these grants to come back to the communities to plant new trees. So this is a great thing.
Gary?
They can go on private property?
They have to be, I think, within 20 feet of the city layout.
Okay, so the idea is to get them
Get
towards
them
the
close,
street.
that's correct.
But they can be on private property.
They can be, but they're within limits. There's 3 bidders. We have received 3 quotes on this, and they were the lowest with the largest amount of trees. The $9,784 covered 124 trees. The next lowest bidder, actually the lowest bidder was $9,748, but they only provided us with 92 trees. So we took the middle bidder because they provided the most trees for the less cost.
And the grant amount was how much?
Total grant award was $9,800. And like I said, it does cover some DPW time, asking as the fiscal agent and for bringing the trees out to different places and so on.
And you moved approval on this?
I
did.
Oh, you
I seconded it.
Great, okay.
I seconded it.
Any other questions about this? All in favor of buying the trees?
Aye.
Aye.
Contract for wetland and permitting services to for Austin Circle to GCA in the amount of $6,900.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay.
This is an ongoing project that's slowly evolving, that we're not quite sure where it's going to go. This is the old drainage swale that was created by KV Homes off of Austin Circle back in the 1960s as Ryan Road developed. What happens out there, besides localized drainage from homes and so on, the city also has a lot of drainage that comes into this area in the backyard, and they've been experiencing flooding problems in their basements due to the drainage swales filled with silt and debris and leaves and trees and everything else over the years. We've had a few community meetings with the counselor out there on this project, and what we've done is taken some baby steps of commitments as we try to figure out what the responsibilities of the city are versus the citizens that own the property and technically own the swale. So this is for wetland survey and mapping of the resource areas so that we can better define the project going forward as to what limitations we might have or restrictions. So it's, like I said, baby steps in the project. It's not a construction project at this point, but we felt the responsibility to kick off part of it, so this is it.
But this is basically happening in their backyards.
This is happening in their backyards.
Sure.
It's been a real problem for a number of years. It has to be addressed somehow.
All in favor of awarding this contract?
Aye.
Okay. Contract for preparation of a comprehensive wastewater management plan, the big one, to Kleinfelder SEA Consultants in the amount of $900,000.
Move approval.
Or approximate.
Second.
Jim?
Ned, I don't know, it's just been handed out to the board so that they can see. exactly what's going to be done here?
I know Mike has seen it in some detail, I'm not sure.
This came up once before.
Yeah,
This is part of this project's been ongoing for over the course of a year at this point. When we started with the project evaluation forms and applying to the state for the 2% loan for the 900,000. City council's appropriated the money for this.
yeah,
And like I said, we are in the process of securing a loan agreement with MW Pat at 2% for this project. This project is the precursor to our long-range management plan for wastewater in the city of Northampton, both on treatment and conveyance side. And at the end of it, when the plan is done and approved by the state, we'll be eligible for 0 to 2% financing for our loans going forward also. So this is one of the planning tools that Jim and I have been working on the past year to year and a half. Obviously, pavement management's been done at this point. Wastewater's here. We're working on the next water study, and we're finishing up stormwater assessment as we speak. So we're trying to craft these long-range plans for city infrastructure so that there's a plan laid out for the Board of Public Works, the City Council, for the next 15 to 20 years.
is it critical that this be approved tonight? I would like to read this.
The project is ready to commence with springtime II monitoring of this 28 points across the city.
Infiltration and flow,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
So the project is literally ready to take off. If we delay much longer, it will just delay the project further out. As far as II study, we don't do II study during dry season, you do a little bit, but
No,
you really try to capture those spring flows.
You read this?
Well, I have a couple thoughts. One is I did go over it when it was presented to the board a while ago. I don't remember exactly when.
Yeah,
And although the price at the time seemed high, $857,000, as I looked at the individual tasks and the amount of work that was being done, it's probably the most comprehensive scope of work I've seen, and it looked to me like the city would benefit from having all of those tasks completed. So then when I asked to look at this current version, which is approximately $900,000, so it's gone up in price by $43,000. I didn't have a chance to understand why we had the increases, and I was hoping Jim could at least explain that to us tonight.
okay.
But then I had another concern, and I don't know whether it rests with this board or with the city law department, but I looked at the amount of the professional liability insurance that the consultant is carrying for this project, and to me it seems low. And it seems low for such a large company, and I don't know if there's been discussion with them and the law department about the amount of the insurance. So I thought, I'm uncomfortable with the magnitude of the insurance. I think it's too low. And then the last thought I had, Jim, was I'm wondering if you would like to have time to read this. I mean, it's a huge contract with a lot of detail. I'm wondering if there's a way we can authorize, if it's the will of the board, the initial work to get the II investigation started up to a certain dollar amount while we look at the balance of the contract.
Well, I think what Ned has to bring before the city council is a financial audit for the whole amount, isn't it?
It's already been done.
That's been done.
Yeah, it's been
All right.
approved.
Yeah, I don't have a problem, as long as you're very comfortable with it. I haven't read the detail of it. I did have an overview of it. This was brought up when I had the short hiatus from the board. And
We tried to get a lot done back then.
Ned and I did discuss it, but I didn't really look at the details of it, and it's something I would really like to look at. I don't want to hold it up because in my initial discussions with Ned, it looked like they were covering most of the things that I would like to see done in the system. And your expertise in looking at it and saying that, this is going to do the job is good enough for me.
So with that, could we have Jim explain the changes?
Yeah.
Um, I'll talk about the changes, and then I did a little bit of research on the professional liability insurance
Okay,
question, so I
sure.
can share a little bit about that once we get through. So we had a draft version of this, which we had discussed several months ago. That had been submitted to the Department of Environmental Protection for approval. They came back with a number of comments and questions about the scope, which SCA then responded to back in January, February timeframe. DEP subsequently approved the changes and additions to the contract, which of course came along with another X thousands of dollars of fee necessary to deal with the changes. So I think the best thing for me to do is to find my copy of the red version, which probably would have been helpful if I had given it to Mike and the board, but I didn't do that. Most of the changes, as I indicated, were a result of department comments. Some of them are related to well, I guess I can just go through by task and describe them a little bit verbally. The task 1 in the contract is assess existing conditions and a data collection task. So the department was requiring that some additional research be done in regard to on-site wastewater management systems, septic systems in the city. Identify the numbers and percentages of on-site systems that have 2 or more pump outs per year. Board of Health documented failures are on lots of a quarter acre, or if private wells are on the site, or if they're within 5,000 feet of public water supply. So it's more research necessary there. The department required that the data collection task include a review of September 2006 Connecticut River Bacteria Monitoring Report that was done apparently by AECOM for the state. As far as the wastewater collection task goes under existing conditions, the state wanted us to include information about the Town of Williamsburg pump run times and other data related to the pump station and metering, and also to look at up to 10 years of data from flows from the Town of Williamsburg.
Maybe a minor point, but Williamsburg flows by gravity.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's a metering station
Yeah,
halfway.
there is, but that mentioned pump run times.
Right, it did.
Yeah.
They'll be really low.
Done. Not to get a credit for that one. The board did it.
If I could just ask Jim, as long as we're just taking a moment here, the only reason we need their opinion is because we want to qualify for the inexpensive money.
Well, it's an important part of it, but obviously doing the study and developing the long-term capital plan is really key. I mean, this is a stem-to-stern review of every aspect of the city's wastewater plan, including treatment, collection, pump stations, everything that we have in terms of facilities, and it will give us that long-term plan and access to the low-interest loan money, to implement it. So there's a lot of components, as Mike had indicated. It's one of the most comprehensive scopes for this type of management plan. It doesn't address only the treatment plan. It doesn't only address infiltration and flow.
I understand, but in terms of the city or the state weighing in on it,
Well,
So that,
my reaction is, if we ever want state loan money in the future for construction of any element of this, then the state has to approve the report.
right, that was kind of what
Yeah.
I was saying in the beginning.
Yeah.
That's the framework within which we want their opinion.
I'm sorry.
And the reason for looking for state money is it's cheap money, 2%.
In general, and
Yeah.
times, it's even better than,
Right. Yeah,
more attractive than 2%.
yeah.
Like my understanding, they're funding nitrogen reduction projects at 0%.
They are.
They were this past year.
Oh, that's nice to know.
So the state has a lot of published guidance in regard to the performance of these studies, and a lot of and the scope originally was prepared in accordance with the guidance. There were a few things that SCA didn't include, or there was oversight on their part by not including them, and that a lot of those items ended up back in the scope, sort of how we went along. The last part under the existing conditions assessment work was also to review potential interconnection points between sewer and drainage systems. And there were a couple of examples listed in the scope where that may be an area that we want to look at. They wanted us, SCA, to identify and discuss recent sewer backups and sanitary sewer overflow histories in Northampton. Also, they wanted an evaluation of grease loading to the sewer system into the wastewater plant, and determine if existing grease traps at restaurants are adequate, or whether changes are needed. And then there was a technical memorandum that was added to this task to pull together a summary of everything under that task. So that was task 1. Moving along to task 2, which was assess future conditions, there was some additional requirements to make sure that changes to the Bradford Street pump station were included into the CWMP, including increased discharge proposed from the Coca-Cola facility and other industrial park discharges. There was a requirement that we meet with Williamsburg officials to discuss status of wastewater from that community, and also to do projections for increased flow from that town. And there was a technical memorandum added to task 2. Task 3 is a wastewater needs analysis. And there were a couple of changes that were made there to the scope. I think one of the major cost changes was the inclusion of 5 days of subsurface explorations to do soil borings, and also to do percolation tests to do soils evaluation in certain parts of town, which is required as part of the state's comprehensive wastewater management plan scope. Task 4 was the infiltrate.
Jim, by the way,
Sorry.
that one item accounts for most of the price increase, as far as I can tell.
It might be that that equipment, originally they had assumed that it would be city equipment doing those that work.
Right, with test pits.
Task 4 was the II study, which there were a lot of comments in regard to some of the modeling that needed to be done and standards that needed to be followed, which I don't think impacted the cost a lot. There was a lot of red ink in this particular task, but I don't think there was a lot related to
And the price actually went down.
yeah, there wasn't a lot there. Task 5 was the hydraulic modeling, similar issue there. On task 6, the wastewater treatment facility evaluation, there was language added related to process evaluation, including updating existing mass balances for flows and loadings to the facility, also to include side streams from the Coca-Cola expansion. Let's see what's good here. They're going to develop an overall process model for the treatment plant that'll be used for planning for the future.
Looked like there was no change in price there.
Wasn't too much. I know one area there was about a $13,000 or $14,000 change. Was a task. I'm going to go right to the end. There was a task related to administration of the loan. There are monthly reports that are due to the state. There's a lot of paperwork associated with the loan, and I had asked them to add a task for that on these big loan projects that we've done on the water side. AECOM has been really helpful in keeping the paperwork flowing for reimbursement. So I asked SCA to provide that, which they did as task 15, which again I think was on the order of $13,000. Yeah, it's about $13,000 for that task.
And Jim, are you and Ned confident that at the end of this process, we'll have exactly what we need to begin scheduling maintenance on our system?
I would say scheduling maintenance, the infrastructure improvements.
Replace, yeah, something, I know won't look like the pavement management system, but something where it'll be fairly clear what our next move is.
what our next needs are, and then we have to decide which projects we're gonna tackle. There's gonna be a lot, believe me. There's a lot of our sewer infrastructure is from the 1890s to early 1900s. Most all our pump stations are well in the area of 30 years old at this point. The last upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant's 30 years old.
Most of our pump stations were put in '79, and we had the one at the industrial park before that.
So I think this is gonna be an exhaustive review of our wastewater system with a long laundry list of things that need to get done and prioritizing them. And this has been one of my goals since I was asked to be director from the mayor and putting together these long-range plans for the board, the council, the department. So that's what we're focusing on. Like I said, we've done pavement management, I've got a pretty good handle on that at this point. This is our next one. We've done a water capacity study and done some of the recommendations from that, but we haven't done an asset management study on water. So that's one that Jim and I are crafting as we speak, and the stormwater one is winding down also. So that we'll have a good handle as to what our infrastructure needs and long-range capital plans are for stormwater management in the city. I think they're prudent planning tools for the department and for the board. They're just somewhat expensive.
Yeah, and I guess we just have to really sit on it and make sure that the end product, I mean, we have spent this much money on other plants, I won't mention Stantec by name, but, you know, sometimes you don't get quite what you thought you might get. I'd be ashamed not to get everything we need on this.
I think it's pretty thorough.
Well, with the outline that Jimmy went through and what Mike has said, I'm pretty confident that will do the same. It will be the tool of the future. It has to be the tool of the future.
Yes.
Here?
I just have my usual three-dimensional questions. Are they gonna camera a lot of stuff? Is that part of what they're doing, or are they gonna pull together a library of what has already been cambered? How does that happen? You can really see what's down there.
There'll be televising, there'll be cleaning, there'll be a number of manhole inspections along major spines of the system. It isn't looking up the side street on Bank Alley, but it's looking at the trunk lines, the interceptors, and some important areas as the II study progresses and we find out where we have stormwater issues in there. There'll be a focus in those areas also.
There'll be a lot of field work. We had a meeting with them about a week ago trying to establish the meeting locations. And I mentioned 28 flow meter locations in different manholes across the city so that we can look at different sewer drainage areas and get data. Ned mentioned the manhole inspections. I think the scope included 500 sanitary sewer manhole inspections across the city. We do have a lot of TV work that's been done by the sewer department, which is available for them. And we can also do additional TV work that may be helpful to them in the completion of their work. They budgeted 3,000 linear feet of TV inspection in their contract, so that's included as part of the field work as well.
Are we gonna do, is this sewer and storm?
No.
Just sewer? Just the sewer. Okay.
Will we get the data in a way that will integrate with our MIS system?
Our GIS system.
GIS system?
Andy Keith, our coordinator, has been involved in these conversations and meetings also. So a lot of it is going to be GIS driven.
So those 500 manholes, which we already know where they are.
That information will come in and will get populated into the database.
Okay.
We'll know that, X amount of manholes don't have steps in them. They need frames and covers. They need, inverts or whatever.
No, that'd be great.
That's the goal.
Jim, you said something about the liability insurance.
Yeah, so there were some questions about the liability insurance. So I had a conversation with Joe Cook and tried to recreate some information in terms of how we got where we are. The work that's being done by SEA was determined through a request for proposals and proposal submittals on an RFP that we had issued back in 2008 to 2009. We've been issuing contracts under that proposal process. That proposal, the RFP that we sent, referenced city insurance requirements for professional liability in the amount of $50,000 or the fee for basic services, whichever is greater. So Joe said in this case, because that was the language that was in the RFP, that's what the requirement would be for this particular contract. The certificate that they've submitted for this is $1 million in professional liability insurance for this particular project. I talked to, I had a little back and forth with Joe Cook, and I think if in the future, if we want to require more professional liability insurance, that's something that we need to determine on a case-by-case basis. I think, for studies, you need to balance the cost of the insurance that you're going to require with the risk from the project that the designer and the engineer is undertaking for you. I think there's more risk on a design project where they're designing something that's going to be built, where the capital cost is in the millions of dollars, and having some additional liability insurance above $1 million in that case, I think probably makes sense. I did talk to SEA as well and went back to them to get their input on coverage, and they said generally that they prefer the $50,000 of the cost of the project from a liability standpoint, professional liability insurance standpoint, for the reason that it's the less liability insurance coverage they need to buy them, the less it is to buy that policy. There was a question that the $1 million insurance certificate that was submitted on this particular project would cover the CMP, would cover this project, but it is also subject to aggregation, which means that they have other projects up to $1 million covered under the same policy. So if there was a big run on, liability claims against SEA, and we were in there for $1 million, and somebody else was in there for $1 million, and somebody else was in there for $2 million, their insurance only covers $1 million. So we're sort of aggregated in to other projects under this professional liability insurance certificate. I don't know what the appropriate amount is. I know in the last firm I worked with, $1 million liability was, was common on the size projects that I was managing, but I wasn't, and some design projects were multi-million-dollar projects, and $1 million was fine, fine for the clients I was working with. SEA had mentioned that, if clients require, a special amount, $5 million or whatever, that, there's a cost associated with that being provided, and that needs to be discussed in terms of the fee of the project, as part of the negotiation. I'm not sure if I hit everything. I think that's about what I could find out today.
Well, everything Jim says sounds familiar to me and what I was involved with when I was working full-time. The piece where I think there's a disconnect is the city asked for insurance in the amount of the contract, really, $900,000. And I don't think there was an expectation on the city's part that might be eroded by other claims. And that's really what they've given us, is $1 million policy for SEA Kleinfelder. And if you look at the list of companies that are covered by that claim, it's really quite long. SEA Kleinfelder. Kleinfelder itself is a very large company. And so it seems to me that because the policy can be eroded by claims from any of those companies that are part of that umbrella, that we're really not getting much protection here. And it doesn't sound like we're getting the protection that we sought, that we stated in the RFP. And so although I think $1 million's light, especially for a company that size, I can certainly honor what we asked for in the RFP, but I think we ought to get all that we asked for in the RFP, and I really don't think we are here.
I mean, seems like you're, at face value, that sounds correct.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't ask Joe that particular question, but I can certainly do that.
We're named as additionally insured, right?
Well, that doesn't apply to professional liability insurance. Since we are the insured, I mean, we're getting the coverage.
I think the interesting thing in this, and I didn't go back and do exhaustive research, but we had a $5 million professional liability insurance certificate when they were SCA before they were bought by Kleinfeld, which
Yeah.
I thought was interesting considering Kleinfeld was a larger company, but maybe they have more wily lawyers or something.
Well, at face value, Mike's point seems valid. We asked for the $900,000 worth of coverage.
I think we should round it up to $1 million. Give
Just
us
for the
contract
time it's
amount
taken
is-
us tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I do contracts with consultants, and I believe we asked for $1 million. And I've never heard about this aggregate thing. That seems really,
Start looking at what they
really
submit to you.
misleading. Well, I don't write these things.
Oh,
I
yeah.
go through a purchasing department, but,
Yeah.
they,
I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that professional liability claims, in my experience at least, are pretty rare.
I would think so.
And I think that's part of the aggregation aspect of it. It keeps their costs down, and it's rare that a claim actually goes to an insurer for payment. I don't know if that provides any sense of comfort. I know that I've worked on a number of projects that have had problems, both projects here and then projects with firms that I've worked with in the past where there were professional liability issues that came up, and consultants will work really hard to make those go away without going to their insurer in terms of negotiating a solution that satisfies their clients when they need to tap into their insurance when these things do arise.
Okay. Sort of get off this particular agenda item and on to the next one. And it would seem to me that it's really a call for the city, right? So it would be Joe Cook. Say, hey, should we accept this? And then if he says no, we shouldn't, then obviously we shouldn't. And then we'd have to go back to SEA and say, it's gotta be, it's just a cost, right? I mean, couldn't they add that cost to their contract?
No, I don't think they should.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think they should either,
It's not
because
what
we
we
asked
said
them
we
for it,
would.
but then they've got the wrong number if that's not, in other words, they're not providing everything we asked them for.
Well, you can explore that.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just amend the motion to say, move approval pending, an okay from Joe Cook?
Yeah, I think Mike makes a good point that,
Yeah.
pending, $1 million of professional liability insurance provided for this project only, and not in aggregate with any other SCA client level projects. And then make sure we get that right, insurance certificate from them.
That's good.
I'll second that.
Oops, I can't make a motion.
Okay,
You clarified. That was fine.
so you got that, TJ?
I'll get it on the tape, yeah.
Okay.
I understand.
All right, so the vote is, unless there are other questions or thoughts? All right, so the vote is to approve the contract with the proviso that they'll straighten out the insurance issue. All in favor of approving the contract?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Change order number 4 to contract number unknown for Phase 3B construction
I forgot to put it.
for $23,000. So this, I'll bet this has something to do with the landfill.
Well,
It does. At the last board meeting, the board had approved some additional work that Stantec did in making some field changes and additional design changes. And some of the work that they designed ended up costing additional money via a change order with Bates. This change order, which will be the last one in this project, was for work related to grading changes of the South Road that accesses the landfill. There was additional gravel, about 766 cubic yards of gravel was placed and compacted under the road, and work associated with a culvert under that section of roadway was done under this work. Compaction testing and oversight by a testing lab was provided during the placement of this additional gravel. And the value was over $22,982, as Jerry mentioned.
Any questions about this? All in favor of approving the change order?
Aye.
Next is a contract for automatic lubrication system to Midwest Lubricate in the amount of $5,700.
Move approved.
Second.
This is for the new bucket loader that the parking division bought from the Department of Public Works. It's about $145,000 bucket loader that was purchased, and the DPW inadvertently forgot to ask for a automatic lubing system on it. It's nothing that you can buy at the factory. It's an add-on after the fact anyways. So we solicited 3 quotes for this. The company would come out and install this lubrication system on the bucket loader. Basically, it saves a lot of labor and time by our staff of having an automatic lube system in the piece of equipment rather than manually doing it on a daily basis. And this was the low bidder. The other 2 bidders were over $7,000 each.
So basically would have added to the price of the original purchase had it been in there.
That's correct.
All in favor of approving this lubrication system?
Aye.
Next is contract for water audit to plumbing technical specification, contract for water audit, some plumbing technical specifications and reporting to Tata and Howard in the amount of $19,000.
Move approval.
Second.
This is a contract with Tate and Howard to provide us with some consulting assistance related to a water conservation grant that we have just signed a contract for. And the water conservation grant was in the amount of about $54,000, which includes the cost of this water audit that Tate and Howard is going to be helping us with. The work in this contract is mainly related to the performance of the water audit in accordance with DEP guidelines and requirements, and also includes assistance in preparation of the plumbing technical specifications to assist the city in purchasing 96 low-floor toilets to be placed in municipal buildings. So part of the grant, the water conservation grant that we were awarded included replacing, upgrading toilets in city buildings to low-flow units. So Tate and Howard's going to help us with specifications in that, technical specifications in that regard.
Mike?
Does the grant cover installation of the toilets also?
It does.
And disposal of the old ones?
It does.
There's nothing you can do with them. Okay.
We actually, there's a little bit of background on this grant. This grant is particularly exciting for us because we're required by one of our Water Management Act permits to upgrade toilets in municipal buildings. Is actually something that we're mandated to do by one of our permits, so it takes a little bit of the sting out of it when we've got money to cover, to help cover the cost of that work.
Which permit?
The Water Management Act permit for the water supply system.
Huh. And how many toilets?
We have
96.
inventoried 96 that need replacing.
And does that become C and D at the landfill? So,
Art material for art.
Need a planter?
They crush up.
Don't laugh,
Yeah.
I see that done.
Yeah,
Take them to Dusso's transfer station.
I think there's some in my driveway, to be honest. These white porcelain stuff.
all right, so, and this is largely gonna be paid for with a grant, or a big chunk of it.
Entirely.
Great. All right, so all approving this contract for the water audit and the plumbing technical specifications and reporting.
Aye.
Okay. This meeting is running so long, we think about moving a discussion of below grade to the next.
You wanna table that?
Would that be all right?
That'd be fine.
All right, so I'd like to table 13.
Thank you.
A set date for claims committee,
5:15.
next meeting.
14.
This is the Faith Baptist Church on French
Oh.
Road, and the unpaid water bill from,
Hmm.
forgot how long ago.
We've met with them before.
No.
So is this going to the
These are
6th or the 13th?
13.
Second Wednesday.
Okay.
How many years have you been doing this?
You know, I never pay attention to those
April
details. Okay,
Does that work?
Sure.
I think
What
so.
time do you want?
5:15, is that what we said?
Yes.
After tonight, should we make it 5?
Should we get together a little bit early to talk about that one with Barrett?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
that's a
okay,
good point.
that's fine.
Should get together at 5.
So 5, for some continuing discussion.
Okay,
And then
but
5:15.
5:15 for them, okay.
Great. Okay, next, old business water restriction policy.
We had, the board had approved a new water restriction policy last year for the city, that was drafted to, meet the requirements of our Water Management Act permit issued by DEP. That policy that we drafted was based on the city's average per capita use of water of being less than 65 gallons per capita per day. And the permit actually has a stipulation. There are 2 tables in the actual permit when you go to it. There's a certain water restriction that you need to enact if your per capita use is less than 65. If your per capita use goes over 65, then there's another table in the permit that has different conditions. So what happened was, when we drafted this policy, our per capita use for the previous calendar year was less than 65 gallons per capita per day. In last year's annual statistical report we submitted to the state, per capita use went up over 65 to a number that's somewhere on the order of 70 or something. I don't remember what it is for the moment, but it's over 65. And that, because we went over 65, there was we needed to update this water restriction policy, which is what this is all about. I had, hopefully the board had received a copy of an underlined strikeout version of this. The only change, really, that makes, there's on page 205, there's a little underlined addition there, which just describes what I just described. And then on page 3-5, the main difference about how to implement the water restriction, our permit requires that if we go into a water restriction under the mill, by the Mill River dropping below a certain level, there can be no non-essential outdoor water use. And previously, last year, it was no non-essential outdoor water use between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. So what they're telling us is that even in the evening hours, there can be no non-essential outdoor water use. So, in thinking what that means, I was struggling with that a little bit, which the board may be struggling with it, in terms of what is non-essential outdoor water use. So I went back to the permit, which described it as department definition, washing of exterior building surfaces, parking lots, driveways, or sidewalks, except as needed to apply paint, preservative, stucco, paving, or cement. Another non-essential outdoor water use is washing of vehicles other than by the means of a commercial car wash, except as needed for operator safety. And then the last one, which was confusing me, was, those two are pretty straightforward. The last one was irrigation of lawns, except by means of a handheld hose outside the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So there's a sort of a discrepancy in the way our permit is worded. It's not clear at all whether or not irrigation of lawns by handheld hose would be allowed under our new water restriction policy. I have contacted the Springfield office of DEP and asked them that question, and they promptly responded that they don't know the answer to that particular question, which I think is important for us to resolve because it's related to, lawn irrigation, which is near and dear to everyone's heart. So we're waiting for a call back and a clarification from DEP in Boston on that particular issue, but that was really the only change.
So garden, no problem? After,
Food, no problem. Garden, no problem.
except during the middle of the day?
That's not even restricted during the middle of the day, according to my reading of this.
Acceptable outdoor water use outside the hours of 9 to 5, include irrigation of lawns, gardens, flowers, and ornamental plants via handheld hoses.
And in another section here, doesn't it read that vegetable gardens you can water anytime?
Not subject, yep. Production of fruit or fiber, not subject to restriction.
Just out of
Yeah, right.
curiosity, how much of the 73 gallons is the water leak that I guess we fixed?
We're working out the numbers for, we think, Dave Sparks thinks a good portion of it is related to these leaks that we found in the leak location that we did last summer. And we're hopeful that that's what it was, but until we get a year's worth of data after the fix was done, we can't really take credit for that. We can only, but you're right, we're hoping that would account for a lot of it.
Okay, Mike?
I guess along those lines, the data that we used to formulate the policy said we were less than 65 gallons per capita per day, which I presume would have included some of the leaks that we fixed last year, although some might have been new last year. You don't really, I guess you don't know how old the leaks are.
Yeah, this goes back, so the way this works is it goes back to the previous year's annual statistical report, which means we're not looking at 2010 data, we're looking at 2009 data.
Okay.
And last year we were looking at 2008 data. So it goes back a year further back than you would think, because it's based on a year of data and calculations that gets reported.
All right, so then that starts to answer my next question, which was how could we go up in a year where we instituted a ban?
Yeah, I think
But we're not looking at that year.
No, we're not looking at that year yet. But I can explain the difference. There was a long, the city had been calculating per capita water use for a long time in a certain way. And then we started taking a closer look at how that was being done to see if we could make it more accurate. If there was questions and some things were coming up during the process of that calculation. And we felt that we could make the calculation more accurate if we modified the way that it was done. And unfortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, we believe the number's more accurate, but the capital number went up.
Apologies.
Night, Rob. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, I got distracted there for a moment. Are we, any other questions about the water policy?
Do we have to have a motion to make that change to implement it?
Are we still waiting for the answer from, or actually the answer isn't relevant, they'll tell us what it is and that's it. So you'd like to modify it now? So we need a motion to modify our
So
policy.
moved.
Second.
And further discussion? All in favor of modifying our policy
Aye.
to reflect the new rate, a new amount of usage? Okay. Great. Solid Waste Task Force update. I wasn't there. And we're fortunate this evening to have a member of the Solid Waste Task Force who perhaps could tell us a little bit about it.
Well, everyone presented their opinions as to what they think would be the best collection options, and in the end, it was a 5-4 vote that the city would maintain the current collection system of the transfer stations, but would explore the option of curbside pickup. You know, I think it was supported that most people thought it would probably be an eventuality that we would switch to that eventually, but that it would be too much of a change for the current system. The committee also endorsed the idea of switching from stickers to bags for collection at the transfer stations. There was discussion about trying to, you know, there wasn't a discussion on how it would be funded, but there was a discussion on trying to continue the education program that's currently existing at Jackson Street School that's been very successful, and that would be able to be replicated in all of the schools in the city. And other than that, at our next meeting, we're going to be reviewing everything and hopefully putting together in a format that's more understandable. So.
Jim, anything to add?
No, well done.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, an effective utility management program. Only 5 minutes to discuss something like this.
I'll be quick. We have been contacted by DEP and Mass Waterworks about whether or not the city would be interested in participating in a program that's sponsored by EPA, and the program is related to effective management, effective utility management. And basically what's happening here is EPA is proposing that they provide assistance to communities that receive stimulus funding, which we received for the Spring and Clark Street Wall project. So we're eligible to participate in this particular program. And the goal of the program is to enhance the operational sustainability. This is in a package, a little package there that handed out, but I'll just read this. The goal is to enhance operational sustainability of wastewater and water systems in New England, based on assessing systems utility management practices, effective utility management guidelines, and also that will help the system improve long-term management and operation of the system. So basically what this is EPA has a contract with the Cadmus Group, who's a consulting firm. The Cadmus Group would visit the city of Northampton and work with us on concepts related to effective utility management. I had a discussion with a person over at Cadmus Group today about this. I told them that we were still interested in the program. If this happens, it would likely be in July. I think it might be a day-long workshop here at the city. They would come into the city and work on some issues with us. And it's on the water, related to the water utility. My thought was, Ned and I, obviously Dave Sparks, the water superintendent, Anne Marie Sharrow, the financial administrator, possibly representation from the board if people have time and interest in sitting through this particular program. You might find it interesting and useful in the work that those board members. So that's it. Just want you to think about it when it gets closer and we have dates and that sort of thing, and we pass that on.
Do you see anything in this that's going to increase the operational costs of the department itself? Coming out of recommendations and so on?
I'm not sure what to expect.
We've talked for years about exercising each one of the valves on the water system so that when there's a break, they are able to open and close them.
Yeah.
Now, these are things we have never been able to do and haven't had the personnel to do. And if they're going to come along and tell us that this is part of the efficiency that we should be doing, well, we know that. Where is the money?
Yeah, I think that Jen Peterson, who's the executive director of Mass Waterworks, in this email, which is in painfully small font that I handed out to you,
Yes.
says that EPA explained to me that Cadmus will put together a prioritized plan for improvement, provide tools that the utility will use. It says, it seems like it's a good opportunity to get some free assistance. EPA also noted that this in no way is tied to enforcement, so that there are no regulatory issues facing the utility. They don't have to worry about enforcement piece if they're involved. So basically, it's a good faith educational effort to help communities with utility management ideas, but there aren't any strings associated with the information that we'll be bringing. So it's a good point, Jim.
I'd be interested in going to that if there's openings.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, since they're coming in to Northampton, I think
Yeah.
whoever's available and interested, certainly would be most welcome.
Great. Gary, is there anything we missed?
I don't know.
Anything you'd like to talk about?
Covered a lot.
We did.
I know, I'm okay.
All right. Jim? Mike?
I'd be interested in setting up the meetings to go over the budget, find out what.
What I'll do is I'll send out an email to all board members
Okay.
with some dates and times. I assume you'd want to start at 8 in the morning or 8:30 in the morning. How long do you want them for? An hour, 2 hours each? We could discuss some parameters, like we can set up some dates and times going forward.
Of course, that's coffee available.
A copy would be made available.
Cookies?
Cookies too? Okay.
Eight's fine with me, I don't know
Yeah.
how everybody else feels about it.
It's fine.
You can only have 3 at a time.
That's right.
And maybe a couple hours. I don't know that we need it, but
We can set aside 2-hour
we've
blocks.
got 4 budgets still.
I'll get an
So we'll do it
email
with email.
tomorrow.
No, that's fine. The other item is, I didn't seem to get a copy of the water restriction changes, or if I did, I don't know where it is.
I'll give you mine.
That's excellent.
BJ emailed it to us, so we had to pull it off.
I've had that before.
Yeah.
Just,
You're all part of one group.
I-
One gets it, you all get it. Nice
I-
try.
I will go double check.
There's 5 pages to that. And it's interesting reading, it really is.
Thank you.
I read the same thing, if you're
Yeah,
growing
how about you?
food.
I'll send
It
Yeah.
does say garden, but then I
Just
think
something briefly, I wanted to
garden could be flowers.
just to say that the planning department had gone through a charrette recently on King Street and Main Street. It was like a 3-day effort that Laura and Ned really were participating in more than myself. I went to the final presentation and I saw Gary there at the end of the charrette. And I thought that the engineers from Nelson Nygaard really did a really great job in a limited amount of time, gathering a lot of input and coming up with some really interesting ideas for King Street and Main Street. And my understanding is that they're going to be producing a final report or document that will be available online for everybody to take a look at. But it really could seem like there were some ideas that it could change, some aspects of the city, I think, for the better, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
it sounds
thought
like it would impact our roadways, Main Street.
Yeah, the big question always is where's the money gonna come from, for some of these changes, but, pretty visionary, I think. I thought they did a really nice job in the time that they had.
And the other thing is, where does the snow go?
Well, according to the St. Patrick's Day party in Boston, they're dumping it in the harbor. And that raised my eyebrows.
Jason did speak directly to that question, and the only reason that we put our snow in the middle of the road is because our road is big enough to do that. And there's only one other community that does that, and it's in Concord, New Hampshire, that he's aware of. And everyone else has to haul it immediately, I guess. I don't know what that looks like exactly, but.
Looks like green.
Yeah, exactly. Right, you gotta do it at the same time you're plowing, I guess. But that's what everybody else does. Or you pile it on the side and you have to step over the pile of snow to get to the meters. And I remember one year in the city of Springfield,
It's worse.
they said you don't have to pay, you don't have to pay anymore.
David, is there anything you wanted to talk about tonight that we didn't get to? I'm okay. Motion to adjourn.
So we'll
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.